Hi everybody, my name is Laura Nash. I'm the owner and designer at Sochig Pattern Company. You might also know me from craftsy.com. I'm an instructor on there. And I'm also a special collections designer for Simplicity Pattern Company. So today we're working on a pair of pants for a fashion show, and it's from this pattern right here. I call this the Phantom because the jacket is made out of organza, so you can see through it, and I think it's super cool. The pants are adorable. They have a high waistband and a capri length, which make them really fun to wear and completely vintagey. So I thought I'd stop and take a minute to show you how we do that install. So I hope you'll stay tuned and enjoy. So the first thing they tell us to do is to fold or press our zipper teeth out. And I've already done that. I don't know if you can see that because this color is so very dark. But the teeth are now to the front instead of to the back because I've pressed them out. And you can tell that you've done a good job with that because as with this zipper here that I've done nothing to, you can see that it lays nice and flat, just the way it is. And when I zip this one up, you can see that the tape starts to bend up and go together. So I know that I've done a good job pressing out that zipper because that tape goes together. The other thing that you'll want to know about is a zipper foot, because we want to sew so close to that zipper coil. We need a special foot for that. Actually, you don't have to have a special foot. You could do it with a zipper foot, but it's kind of tricky. So our manufacturers have invented these cool little things. You can see that there's a kind of a ditch in the back for our coil to go into. And this one only has one hole for our needle, while this one has two holes for our needle. They both slide back and forth so that you can do left side and right side and match up the needle where it needs to go. But I like this one because that groove is so much deeper, and it's nice to have the two holes for my needle, even though it's not really required. So I'm going to use this one here. So the next thing you'll want to do to prepare your pants or prepare your product before you get to working on it is I've got my opening here. You can see I've got a pin in there so that you can see it better. I've made sure that my seam or my seam length matches up, that my waistband seams are going to match perfectly, and end to end those are going to match perfectly. If one side is longer than the other, now is the time to make sure and match those up, because it's not going to get any better once you start working with it on the zipper. The other thing that I've done is I've pressed under my seam allowance. Now that press is going to become a guide for me because I want to make sure that my seam allowances are accurate. And I always use a seam gauge for this purpose, because the zipper tape is not going to be a good gauge. If I were to put this, match that up, that's only 3/8 inch. So that's not going to work. And even a regular all-purpose zipper, the seam allowance or the seam tape on that is only 3/8. So you can't match those up end to end and expect them to fit. So I've got my zipper here, and I'm ready to put it in. I need to have it open, and my zipper needs to be longer than the opening that it will go into. I like a good 2 inches. It doesn't have to be that long. It could be just 1 inch longer, but for my method to work, it has to be longer. Absolutely must have to be longer. So what I usually do is I hold this up right side and side to right side, and then so that I can get it right, I take this side and I fold it over this way so that I know how to put that in. It'll come out correct. The other thing I have to do is I want to make sure that my stop ends up at exactly 5/8 of an inch so that my seam allowance on top is perfect. I don't have this big gap, I don't have something left over. I can just line up my stop so that it's right below my 5/8 inch seam allowance. And I'm going to match up where these teeth are. They're going to be just to the right of this fold. So I've got that lined up, and I'm going to pin that in, and now I'm ready to stitch. I'm not going to pin anything else but that top piece this time around. So we're going to move to the machine, and we'll readjust for that. So here I am under the machine. I've got my needle set up. Made sure that my needle goes down in that hole exactly the way I want it to. Here's my pants, and I wanted you to see that here's my top stop, and there's my pin. So everything's the way it should be. And I can pull that pin out because I don't need it anymore. I'm going to throw that in underneath here. In fact, I already had that nailed down at the top, so it's not going to slip around on me. And I'm going to start sewing. Be sure to back stitch. You can see that my teeth, my coils are going right up into that slot, and I'm going to look, hold, stitch, look, hold, stitch, look. Guys, so every step of the way, I don't need any pins, I just need to make sure that everything matches up down here. Now that we're getting close down here to my stitching, and I'm going to make sure that my teeth also match up exactly, and I'm going to stop right at that place where my fold and my previous my seam allowance, my seam, stops. So I'm going to go right up to it, and I'm going to pay attention to where that is, and then back stitch, check my work, and there's my seam, there's my stitch, there's my coils. Maybe not as close to my coils as I should be, because I'm going to end up with a little bit left over. But that side is completely done. Now we're going to stop and set up for the second side. So here we are. The pants on this right side has a zipper in, and you can see how important it would be. You can't do this method with a zipper that's too short. We must have a zipper that's longer than the opening that we're putting it into. So this piece will be tucked down in here after we're done, and we'll just stitch that to the seam allowance to hold it out of the way. But we've got a little complication because we've got to match up our seam line here. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So So we're going to close this. And I could put a pin right here to mark where that location is going to be. Or I can use my chalk. Might be easier to see chalk. There's my chalk line. And I'm going to match that up to the other side. So now I'm going to put 2 pins on the other side. One will be at the top at the 5/8 inch point, and the second pin will be where this matches up. So I want to make sure we don't get this all tangled up. Hold that like this and then flip it over. I'm going to match that to the top stop. And I'm going to match that to my seam line. It looks like they match up fine, but if you don't get those pinned and sewn exactly the way you want it to, then it will, even a little tiny bit, that seam will look really odd and awkward and mismatched and so forth. Pinning down here at the bottom is unnecessary. I've never had any trouble with it. You just sew all the way to the end, and these two edges will the ends will match up perfectly. So I'm going to go under the machine. I'm going to sew it just the way that I showed you how before, and then I'll come back when they're finished. So here we are. The pants are done. The tails are matched and the seams are matched. If you have a hard time zipping up your zipper, then it means that your teeth or your stitching is too close to the teeth. And if there's a great big gap in here, then that means that they're not close enough. Your stitching's not close enough. So on the inside we have a long tail that protrudes. You can zigzag across the coils here, cut it off and get rid of that. You want to be sure and tack down on the seam allowance on both sides so that the tail doesn't get in the way. You can just leave this in there if you want to. Many times in a dress, if it doesn't make any difference, I'll just leave that there hanging. Otherwise, it looks pretty good. Needs to be pressed again. And I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you for joining me.